Hi, I'm Carter, and Pete's my daddy. I'm also listening to today's podcast, but first, check this out.
One of the reasons why voiceover has exploded in recent years is because it's so much easier to make video. And so people need voiceover for video. And then audiobooks have blown up recently as well. And then e-learning. Oh my gosh, e-learning is huge because there's so much more training being delivered online versus in person. So there is absolutely a ton of opportunity.
Alrighty, everyone, this is the Money Peach Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Peach, and I'm going to be bringing on some of the most amazing people I can find so they can tell you how they do their life and their money the right way. My guest on the show today is the one and only Carrie Olsen. Carrie is a professional voiceover actor. You could hear her in things like Pandora commercials, maybe a YouTube commercial. She might even be the person at the self-checkout grocery store that prompts you where to place your goodies after you purchase them. So Carrie's been in the voiceover business for a couple of years now, and she's absolutely crushing it. But the reason why I wanted her to come on the show is I wanted her to share with you guys ways that you could be generating extra money from the comfort of your own home by getting started as a voiceover actress. So if you're thinking of what are some ways that might be fun, might be interesting, where I can generate extra income, this is a growing industry. Carrie's going to talk about how this is absolutely something that everybody can do, and if you put in the effort, you can be doing it as well. So without further ado, let me bring on Carrie Olsen. She's from carrieolsenvo.com. What's up, Carrie? Excited to have you on the show today. You are the first ever we've had that's a voiceover actor, actress. I want to make sure I'm saying the right thing, but you're the first voiceover professional that we've had. And it's a cool story. I mean, I've known you for a few years now, but watching this business grow has been fun. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show today to talk about that, to talk about money. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Chris. I'm really excited to be here.
So where are you calling in from right now?
I'm calling from Kansas City, Missouri.
You know what, Carrie? The day we're recording this, so we record these episodes a few months before they go out, sometimes a month two, but the day that we're recording this is actually the very first day that I started Money Peach. It was just a tiny little blog. It had one post, right? That was it. And so I met this guy in Phoenix who had helped me get started, and he's like, hey, I have some friends that are touring the country in an RV, and they're going to be stopping by. Why don't we go grab dinner with them? I was like, cool, that sounds like fun. And it was Carrie and your husband. That's when I first met you. That was March 23rd. This is the day we're recording. 2015 is when I first met you.
Yeah, that is so true. We were on our tour then, and I absolutely remember meeting you, and you talked about your blog, and it was brand new, and it's awesome. You talked about it's been fun to see my business grow. It's been awesome to see your business grow too, and it's really cool to have been there at the beginning and now be on your show 3 years later. Yeah,
if anybody was there at the beginning, Carrie, it was you, because it was literally, I think, like couple hours old. I mean, I didn't even know what a blog was. So yeah, so enough about that history. I want to talk about the meat and potatoes of what's going on in your world, in your life. You have some really cool things going on. And I know people are going to listen going, this is cool. And I think I could do this. So when I say that you are a voiceover actress or voiceover coach professional, what am I really saying here? Explain to the audience what that is. Because I think it's kind of unique and new to people to hear that for the first time.
Yeah, so basically, and by the way, there are lots of different things that you can call it. A lot of people prefer voice actor, voice actress, voiceover professional. There's a lot of things you can call it. So you can't really get it wrong. I usually just say voice actor. But what that means is really anywhere that you hear a voice, but you don't see the person saying the words, you're hearing a voiceover. So the thing that most of us think about is TV and radio commercials. That's a pretty obvious thing. And then, we go to animation like cartoons. But if you think about it, all of the educational toys that your kids have, those have, someone talking, someone did that voiceover. Audiobooks are huge right now. When you're at the checkout line in the grocery store and the self-checkout says, move your bags over to the whatever, someone did that voiceover. When you're in the bus or the train, next stop, Broadway Street. That's voiceover. So there's a lot of different applications for voiceover. And when you really start to think about it, you'll start to hear it absolutely everywhere. And that's what I do.
Okay, so before we go any further, I got to know, how do you get started in something like this? So it's funny, when you were saying voiceover, for some reason, I was thinking of the show The Smurfs. When I was a kid, I loved The Smurfs, and obviously there was voiceovers for that. For some reason, that's my brain, that's how it works. Came to mind right away, Smurfs. Now you're talking about grocery checkouts and all these other things. It makes sense. But how do you get started? For you personally, where did you go from? Okay, here's what I remember. When I met you in 2015,
I remember hearing you were a voiceover actress and you were actually doing it on the road. But before that even started, how do you even get like in that niche, in that market? Where did you come up with this idea?
I think if you talk to most successful voice actors, a lot of them have a different route that they took to get into voiceover. Some of them kind of stumbled into it, kind of like I did. Other people grew up, maybe they were child actors or they studied theater in college. And so acting was kind of a natural thing for them. And then they transitioned into voiceover eventually, or they always knew they wanted to do voiceover. For me personally, I was working in e-learning before I got into voiceover. So I was creating online courses for a corporation. And through that, got to narrate some of my own courses. Also, my husband, Derek, and I had started a podcast. So I'd been doing several things behind a microphone without realizing that I was doing voiceover. I didn't realize this was a business in and of itself. And it wasn't until we had our first daughter, Amelie, in 2014, and I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be able to stay home with Amelie, basically, and not have to have this 45-minute commute one way every day to work and miss out on so much of Amelie's life. And it's crazy how big of a role podcasting has played just in my life, period. Because one day as I'm driving to work, I turn on a random podcast I'd never heard before. And it was one of those shows where they interview people with unique jobs. And the person being interviewed that day just happened to be a voice actor. And about halfway through the interview, I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like something I could do. And so she's also a voiceover coach. I called her up, started getting training, and eventually started booking work. So she kind of helped me get started on that journey. And actually less than a year later, was able to quit my job and do voiceover full time.
Wow. Okay. So that's cool. I didn't know that part of the story. Kind of where it picks up then is it's not easy work. I say this, I don't know exactly how it works, but I've never met anybody that's successful that said, oh, it was just super simple. You know, I woke up one day and I just pushed a button and now I'm here and I'm amazing, right? It doesn't work like that. You have to hustle, you have to sacrifice. And so one of the things, Carrie, and if you don't mind me sharing this, I mean, I hope you don't because I'm going to share it. I remember when I first met you, you guys had that RV. And so Derek had showed me your shower in the RV and you had turned that into a recording studio. That was where you were doing your voiceover work. Is that right?
Yeah, we converted the bathroom into a vocal booth.
And the reason why I bring that up is, I mean, talk about sacrifice, right? No, most people, they're always going to come up, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but me personally, I'll say this happened to me as well, is that there's so many times where you're like, I should be doing it, but, well, I can't because we're going on this road trip. Oh, I can't work right now because I'm launching a book. Oh, I can't work right now because I'm pregnant, or I can't work right now because I'm having a kid soon, or I can't work right now because, and then you just come up with a reason. You had every reason not to grow and hustle going on this road trip. And then I see you turn your bathroom into a studio. You're very successful now, but before getting to that point, would you mind sharing with us just so we have a realistic view of it? Because, you know, I'm sure when we put together the headline for the title for this episode, you know, it's going to be something along the lines of, you know, how she makes 6 figures as a voiceover actress. But how does she do that, right? Well, it's because we want you guys to listen, right? I think that's common sense, but let's be real here. You didn't start making $100,000 or 6 figures right away, correct?
No, not at all. And thank you so much for pointing that out, because that is something, voiceover is one of those businesses. And I always compare it to, usually I'll bring up, you know, a restaurant, because that is more common. And you think, well, if I'm going to start a restaurant, it's going to take this long to come up with my business plan. Then I'm going to have to find a location. I'm going to have to hire staff. And people have in mind, that's probably going to be a good year, at least, you know, to kind of get that thing going, and especially to be profitable. But because voiceover is perceived as being, quote unquote, just talking, a lot of people have the perception that you get a decent microphone and then all of a sudden you're off to the races and making a bunch of money. And it's easy because I already know how to talk. But that's absolutely not the case. And anyone who's gotten into voiceover, whether they've been successful, and especially those who haven't been successful, will be able to tell you that it's much more than just having a good voice, although that's a great start. It's much more than having the equipment. You know, talking about the sacrifices, when I first got started, and I was gung-ho. I wasn't playing around. When I booked my first coaching session, I was overwhelmed with information because it was a brand new industry, but I loved it and I was going to go for it. I had a newborn at home and a full-time job. So what I would do is I would go to work every morning, get home, you know, dinner with the family, with Derek and Amelie. And then after Amelie went to bed, I would spend the entire evening until I fell asleep auditioning. So training, studying, and auditioning. And then I would audition on the weekends too. So I devoted a ton of time early on, as much as I could, to getting my business started. So it definitely wasn't a passive situation.
So you're working, was it 40 hours a week?
Mm-hmm. Plus commute, yeah.
Plus commute, okay. And you have one child at the time, right? Still got to be a mom, still got to be a wife, right?
Right.
You also had launched a book. I mean, that's kind of a big deal, right? There was a book in there that you guys launched together.
Right.
You had your podcast, and then you were, on top of that, adding in time, effort to learn the craft that you were passionate about.
Yeah.
So when did you sleep?
Well, okay, so that's a really good question. And this is really funny because people who know me well and my husband, well, they know that I'm one of those people who doesn't require a lot of sleep. And so that gives me an unfair advantage. I realize that because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are like my husband. He could sleep 12 hours and he's capable of doing that. And he needs at least like 9 to 10. I need half that. Maybe even, some nights I can cut it even a little shorter. And, with a newborn, that's kind of par for the course anyway. But yeah, I would audition into the wee hours of the night because my biology allows me to do that. So yeah, I didn't sleep very much. I put work into my business. And, I know that there's definitely a lot to be said for self-care. I think that in that time, I was putting in a bunch of hours knowing that I wouldn't have to forever. So it was kind of a sacrifice for the time being so that I wouldn't have to in the future.
It's so crazy you just said that right there. So I had one of the listeners recently sent me this article and said, Chris, on the podcast, you always talk about how pain is a great motivator, how somebody had some aha moment. They didn't like their job. They wanted to do something different. Something in their life caused this like transition where they did an about face or they went after something that they finally been thinking about. And you always say pain is a great motivator. She goes, I agree with that. She goes, however, studies show, and she sent me all these articles and TED Talks, and I'm like, I'm going to listen to this. I'm going to see what she has to say about this. And she was spot on. And what you had just said there was perfect. So what keeps you motivated once you make that turn? And so I'm somebody that actually likes to sleep. And so I tell people all the time, I'm a full-time firefighter. Sometimes we're up all night long, and I still have a podcast, and I still have a blog, and I still have a course. And, there's work to be done. So when I get off work, I'm exhausted sometimes. And thank God they have this thing called Dutch Brothers Coffee here in Phoenix, which has completely revolutionized my life. Little plug to Dutch Brothers. But anyhow, what keeps me motivated is what you just said. I'm excited because I see that light at the end of the tunnel every day gets brighter and brighter and brighter. So it's not the pain that motivates us to keep going. It's the fact is once you make that commitment, you feed off that because you look and you say, wow, I'm doing something. I made a difference today, or I made a step forward today. And those small wins, they work. So for those of you listening that are like thinking, I want to do something like this. I want to be a voiceover. We're going to talk more about how you get started, but just keep that in mind is there's a reason why you want to do it. That's that painful aha moment, right? Something about your life or what you're doing, you want to change. And that's awesome. But what's going to keep you motivated is when you know that I'm going to do this and I see the light at the end of the tunnel. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you start to see the fruits of your labor, and that absolutely motivates you to keep going. And I think that's really important for entrepreneurs. And I was just telling a friend yesterday who's getting started in voiceover, and she's doing so well. She's booking a few jobs, but not as frequently as she wants to. And I said, you've got to think about the small wins. You can't think of just in terms of when I book my next job, but every time that you finish a coaching session or that you have a marketing day and you send out, however many outreach emails, that is a win as well. So you have to appreciate those incremental steps forward and let that be as big of a motivator for you as if you were to book another job.
I love that. So, Carrie, you said a couple years ago, you're driving your car, listening to a podcast, and you hear a voiceover coach come on, and that was your kind of aha moment, like, I'm going to do this. And so right now, there's somebody that's either driving in their car, or on the train, at the gym, they're listening to this going, okay, I'm going to take the next step. All right, so you're sitting with them right now. Pretend that they're sitting next to you, and they say, Carrie, what do I do now? I'm excited. I want to be a voiceover coach. What do I do now?
Yeah, so that is such a huge question. And I mentioned earlier that if you talk to most voice actors, the way that they got to where they are, everybody's situation is different. So if you're coming from a theater background, your start is going to be different than someone who's, an accountant and has never heard of this before, has never thought about it, and just wants to learn more. But a universal answer to that is definitely hire a voiceover coach. You will get to where you want to be so much faster if you have someone guiding you. But in lieu of that, there are books, there are podcasts, blogs, all kinds of things. Get as much information as you can. Find a local meetup group and talk to other voice actors. You'll be surprised. There probably is somewhere close to you other voice actors. And, I've got a Facebook group even for people who are wanting to get started in voiceover. So I think kind of surrounding yourself with those kinds of people, just getting into the industry to get more familiar with the industry is really helpful. And then when you actually do start to work towards booking work, so you're working with a coach, you're getting training, you're learning how to do commercial reads, there are several different routes that you can take to actually get your first job. And a really popular way to get started today in our online world, they're called online casting sites. And it basically acts kind of like an online agent a little bit. Most of them, you pay a fee and then you get access to real jobs, or to at least auditions for those jobs. And you get to audition from home and try to book your first job. That's how I got started. Other people will work with their coach until they're good enough to produce a demo, and they'll produce a demo and then send it out to agents, to actual agents, and try and get work that way. And then some people get started marketing. So they get their demo, they get our website up, and then they just start reaching out to people like crazy and trying to book work like that. And then you can also do a combination of all three. So those are kind of some of the ways that you can kind of get your foot in the door, so to speak, with voiceover.
And you had said before we hit record that you were going to put together some kind of cheat sheet or guide for our listeners because, they're at the gym, they're on the train, they're driving, they can't write all this down. Will we have that for the end of the episode that we can hand to our listeners?
Oh, absolutely. I can give away a getting started guide as well as a guide to some of those online casting sites I mentioned.
Thank you. That's awesome because that just makes it so much easier. I love it when I'm listening to a podcast and I'm like, crap, I'm not going to remember to write this down and I'm not going to know where it's at. So don't worry about that. Continue listening. At the end of the episode, I'm going to give you guys call to action links or something like that where you guys can go and download everything we talk about. So I love the idea of taking action and getting started. I mean, the cool thing is in the world we are in today, you could do everything from home. It's crazy. I was talking to my wife the other day and I was like, do you think our kids are going to actually go to work? Or are they just going to work at home? Like my business could completely be ran from home. Yours could be ran from the shower on the road in an RV, which is amazing. Okay, so the next question I have for you is you are now full-time with your VO business. And the reason why I want to bring that up is I want you to give kind of a realistic time frame. Like we talked about earlier, you don't start and make, 6 figures overnight. But what did that look like going from, and you said you were, sacrificing a little bit of sleep. What was it where you looked at it and said, okay, I can do this full time? What did that look like?
Yeah. So for me, and I have a pretty unique situation, and I make sure that I emphasize that because you shouldn't expect this. What happened for me was the third voiceover job that I ever booked was a national radio campaign that ran for a long time. I worked for this company for almost 2 years. So it was a really big job. It was enough that my husband and I were able to look at each other and say, all right, I was able to do this auditioning part-time, nights and weekends. Because this job is substantial enough, let's go ahead and make the leap and just see what can happen if we do this full-time. So it was a bit of a sacrifice. I had a coach that said, you're still not ready yet, but we took the leap. We risked it and it worked out, thank goodness. So for me, it was that third job that was, a big enough campaign that kind of gave us the freedom to do that. But after that, because that is just one job and you can't live off of just that. So when I went full time, I stayed as a consultant at my e-learning job for a matter of months after that. So even when I was traveling some, I was still for e-learning, but it was a grind. So I was relentless. I tell my husband that, and he calls me just ferocious in the way that I was marketing myself and auditioning like crazy. I took it very seriously. And so that first year I was traveling and, so it looks like, oh, so fun. You can work from anywhere. Well, I was working. I was grinding it out for a year straight, just doing all of the auditioning that I could and then trying to get repeat work and just working it. And then after a year, I switched my focus from auditioning to marketing. And that's when things really kind of took off for me. I felt like I took more control of my business. And as opposed to auditioning and trying to get people to say yes to me, I was reaching out to the companies I wanted to work for and saying, here I am. If you have a need, would love to work with you. And that worked really well for me.
So you said, I have a unique situation. I don't think this is for everybody, but almost every single person, Carrie, that I've had on the show, I'm thinking almost every single one. It might even be every single person that has a success story is they jumped, they leapt, they took a risk. Come to mind is we just interviewed Bobby from Millennial Money Man, and he had saved up $50,000. He was going to leave his teaching job and start blogging full time. Saved up $50,000 and he sent a text to his mentor and he said, all right, I'm at $50,000. As soon as I get to 100, I'm going to leap. I'm going to leave my teaching job and be a blogger. And his mentor texted him back and said, if you don't leave at 50, you're not going to leave at 100. So he leapt, and he said he was scared to death. He didn't have a ton of success in the beginning. And, transition to today, he says he would not be where he is today unless he made that leap. And I challenge you on this one. I mean, disagree with me if you want. Do you think you'd be at the level of success you are today if you didn't have your back up against the wall where there was no other options?
I think that I can confidently say absolutely not. Because like you said, when your back's up against the wall, you have to make it work. If I still was at my job, I would not have been working as hard to make voiceover work. I just wouldn't have had the freedom to go for it and to really grind it out. So yeah, that's an excellent point.
No, I love it. So what does life look like now as a full-time voiceover coach? Here's what I'm curious about. I'm sure people are curious too, is to me, it just seems like it's such a new industry to me. And I'm sure it's not new, but to me, the idea is new. There are lots and lots of jobs out there, or is it the world of being a movie star that it's very limited, or being an NFL player, it's very limited? I mean, is it pretty wide open? Can, a listener like myself or somebody listening on the other end say, is this a viable option?
Hey, that is such a good question. And the answer is there is a ton of voiceover out there. So I mentioned some of the applications early on, but I mean, there's also things like student films and YouTubers and explainer videos. You go to any startup or even Kickstarter, and you hear videos all the time. So one of the reasons why voiceover has exploded in recent years is because it's so much easier to make video. And so people need voiceover for video. And then audiobooks have blown up recently as well. And then e-learning. Oh my gosh, e-learning is huge because there's so much more training being delivered online versus in person. And so those opportunities are fairly new as well, or at least in their current forms. So there is absolutely a ton of opportunity. But similar to acting, you could try and be the next Brad Pitt, and that's, 1 in a trillion chance, right? That's going to happen. But could you get a job at the community theater and have regular work and have a decent living, not millions, but do well doing kind of smaller budget stuff? Yeah. And voiceover is kind of the same way. You can make a great living doing things like explainer videos and e-learning and corporate narration. There's all kinds of voiceover that aren't as, glitzy and glamorous as doing a movie trailer. But there's a ton of work out there if you're open to it.
Yeah, if you're open to it. You got to put in the work. You got to hustle. All right, Carrie, if I wanted to go search and hear some of your voiceovers and be like, oh my gosh, I heard her on the Money Peach podcast, and now I'm hearing her here. Do I got to go to the grocery store and go check something out? Or where's some of the latest work that, you've been featured in or that we've heard you on or we can hear you on?
So I have some commercials airing right now, national TV commercials, as well as I have some friends that text every once in a while and say, oh, I heard you on Hulu. So the Home Chef commercials that are airing at the time of this interview, that's me. And then if you're listening to, streaming radio anywhere, Pandora, that kind of stuff, you'll hear me in some of those ads. So yeah, TV, radio, and I do a lot of regional radio stuff as well. So just depending on, I think I did some Jacksonville, Florida stuff recently. So if you're there, listen out for me. Utah, it's pretty broad.
Very cool. Now, when you say you do these regionals, do you have to go to that area and record, or is it all virtual?
It is all virtual. The only times I've had to travel for work, it's still local. I just go to a local studio usually. So it's kind of like what we're doing right now. We're on Skype, but we use a different technology to record remotely. But very rarely do I have to leave my studio.
Hey guys, I just wanted to pause and take a second to say thank you from me to you for listening to and supporting the Money Peach podcast. Without listeners like you, this show definitely would not be possible, so thank you. The number one question that I receive is this: Peach, I just don't know where to start when it comes to my money. So many of us out there are living paycheck to paycheck. We have tons of debt. We're not making any headway. We can't save any money. We want to go on a freaking vacation where we pay cash for it. Oh, and let's talk about retirement savings and kids' college planning on top of that, right? Where do you start? Well, that's why we created the cash flow formula. The cash flow formula is the same system that Andrea and I used to pay off $52,000 in debt in only 7 months. And the best part is it's 100% free, meaning we are going to send you the free tools and a free lesson on how to set up your own cash flow formula. So to get started, go over to getcashflowformula.com. That's getcashflowformula.com. Once again, head on over to getcashflowformula.com to get your free copy and your free lesson on how to get started the right way. All right, guys, now back to the show.
Carrie, I do this all the time, and I'm going to do it again, is I talk about Seinfeld, because I just love Seinfeld. I think you could reference everything in life to the show Seinfeld. It's one of my favorite shows. It is my favorite show. But anyway, there's an episode where George has somebody look at his hands and say, "Oh my gosh, you have beautiful hands." And he is like, "I'm going to become a hand model." And he actually becomes a hand model, burns his hand. Long story, he's not a hand model, right? It was part of the show. But there's people that I can think of right now that I'm like, you have a really good voice. Like, you have that voice. Like, naturally, I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, I can completely see how she does, Pandora commercials and radio ads and those types of things, because you have the voice for it. It just sounds very natural and soft and easy to listen to. So the reason why I say that is if somebody ever comes up to you and says, "You have a very beautiful voice," here, this is the perfect opportunity now, is you now have been told, just like George Costanza in Seinfeld was told he could be a hand model, you may also have an opportunity to be a voiceover coach or a voiceover actress or actor. So lots of opportunities out there. I think it's just really cool to explore this new career to me. Just the idea that, you could really generate a substantial income by talking. And I'm a huge fan, always talk about audiobooks. And it's so true that there are books that I will tell people like, "Oh, don't listen to that book. You want to read that book because the voice on it's crazy." Mm-hmm. And usually it's the author's voice. They didn't hire a voiceover person to do it. And you're like, their voice is terrible. I can't listen to it.
Just to your point about audiobooks, it's so easy now to self-publish, so that, the gatekeeper is gone with books now. So you can self-publish a book. And so it is kind of the Wild West out there when it comes to voiceover. As an author, we call it kind of a vanity project sometimes. If, I'm going to narrate my own book. And usually it takes the first time, and then they realize, oh, yeah, there is something to this whole voiceover thing. Someone else who's actually skilled in this, who's got training in it, is going to be able to speak to my audience better and convey my ideas better. I'm a writer. I'll do what I do best and write. I'll give the voiceover part to someone who's trained in that.
Absolutely. And I think so many times outsiders looking in say, "Oh, you just sit there and you talk and you can make money." And so my wife is a television news anchor here in Phoenix, and she can't stand it when people are like, "So you just sit and look at the camera and talk?" She's like, "Oh my goodness," right? If it was only that easy, that's what it looks like. And they're supposed to make it look like that. Just like good voiceover is supposed to make it look like it's effortless. It sounds soft and easy to listen to, right? But there's so much work that goes into anything when you're doing something like that. So, Carrie, we're coming up to the end of the show here. I always ask our guests 2 questions, kind of fun. First one is, if you could only give away one book for the rest of your life, one book to one person, this is it, the only book, which book would it be?
No, it's so funny because I'm pretty bad about only reading like business books, business blogs, that kind of thing. But the book that brings me the most joy is Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. So I guess my encouragement to your listeners would be to take a step back from business every once in a while and read something for pleasure.
We're going to put links to the show notes in that as well. So perfect. So that's an older book, correct?
Yeah, it's kind of a beast.
I think that's like early 1900s, correct?
I think it's 18, actually.
So this would be the oldest book anybody's recommended. So I love that, all right? So we'll definitely have there. The next question I have for you is your home screen on your phone. What is it a picture of?
It is a close-up of my daughter Amelie's mouth. When she was 3 weeks old, we had some pictures taken of her, and her little mouth is just so sweet and pouty and newborn. And so I zoomed in on it and screen captured it, and it's been my home screen for years.
I love it. All right. So lastly is people are excited about becoming the next Carrie Olsen. How can they get in contact with you? Where can we find out more about you? Let us know where we can go find more about Carrie right now.
Sure. So my website is carrieolsenvo.com. And I'll spell that because there's a million ways to spell Carrie and 2 ways to spell Olsen. Carrie, like the horror movie. Olsen is Olsen, and then it's VO as in voiceover. So carrieolsenvo.com. And then you can find me on social media. Most places it's just Carrie Olsen VO. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that. And if you're interested in the freebies that I mentioned, the Getting Started Guide and the Guide to Online Casting Sites, you can grab those by texting the word voiceover, all one word, to 44222. It'll reply and say, text your email address. You can text your email address in, and then I'll shoot you over those guides. You can also, if you're sitting at your laptop or desktop, go to carrieolsenvo.com/peach, and I can give you those there as well.
All right. So we'll put links in our show notes to everything we just talked about. The book sheet talked about, we'll put links in there. We'll also have links to the freebies that she's given us as far as how to get started as a voiceover, so you can get started the right way, take it from somebody that is actually doing it very, very well. So we'll have that there. And Carrie, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. And also, personally, I want to say thank you. You and your husband have been a nonstop supporter of Money Peach since I was about an hour old in this business. And so I just want to say thank you. It's been amazing watching your business grow. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and, you know, some of the big gurus out there have actually referenced your program before. Amy Porterfield talks about your program, and I remember listening going, holy, that's so cool that Carrie is now being referenced by some of the biggest people that we look up to in this business. So congratulations to you. You're awesome. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Chris. This was so cool to get to meet back up with you in this way and be on your show. And I hope that it adds value to your listeners. And I wish you all the best.
Just for listeners to know, you might be hearing me at your grocery store checkout. Someday you're going to be checking out and it's going to say, hey, I'm Peach. What'd you get? Bananas? And then that'll be it. That'll be the end of my career. So that's going to be a maybe. So you just listen for me. If you're in the Jacksonville area, I might be there as well. All right, Carrie, thanks so much for coming on.
Okay. Thanks so much, Chris.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, anything that Carrie and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session96. That's moneypeach.com/session96. Special thanks goes out to my producer, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, this show would not be possible. Stay tuned next week for episode 97, where my special guest is Mark Podolsky. He is the land geek, and he's coming on the show to talk about how he uses land instead of normal real estate to become what he calls dirt rich.
When John got sick, he was still working his job, and he goes home, and for 7 days, every day the children were singing, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home, Daddy's home." And then last month, his land investing income exceeded his job income, and he quit his job. It's amazing. Like, he now spends 4 to 5 hours a day with his children. His wife doesn't have to work anymore. I mean, and for me, that is so gratifying. Like, I can die in peace. I mean, we have so many stories like that where people started as a side hustle, then it started out as gas money, and then became vacation money, then it became mortgage money, then it became, hey, I've got a choice. Does my wife continue working, or does she stay home with the kids, or do I quit my job? And it's so amazing for me to have that impact.
We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place, with another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. Hey, and thank you so much for listening. Boom,